We expect important messages to be loud. When someone has something urgent to say, they raise their voice. When an alarm goes off, it's piercing. When we want to get someone's attention, we call out to them. But what if the most important messages don't come that way? What if the most profound guidance doesn't arrive in a booming voice, but in a whisper so subtle that most people miss it? Think about the moments in your life when you've felt a sudden pull, a quiet nudge that told you to go left instead of right, to pause instead of rush forward. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a neon sign flashing in front of you. It was something quieter, something almost imperceptible. And yet, if you paid attention, you felt it. That's how real communication happens. Not through noise, but through presence. And it makes sense. When someone truly cares about you, they don't need to yell to get your attention. They just need to be near enough, close enough, so that their words can be heard without force. We live in a world of noise, social media notifications, emails, endless conversations filled with opinions and demands. Every day, we are bombarded with voices trying to tell us what to do, who to be, how to think. It's exhausting. And yet, in the middle of all that chaos, there's something else, something softer, something still. It doesn't compete for your attention. It simply waits for you to listen. There's a reason why clarity often comes in moments of stillness. When you're alone in the car, when you wake up in the middle of the night with an unshakable thought, when you take a walk without distractions. It's in those moments that the whisper becomes audible. But the challenge is, most of us don't know how to listen. We're too busy waiting for something loud, something undeniable. We want a grand revelation, a voice from the sky, an unmistakable sign that leaves no room for doubt. But that's not how this works. Because if the voice was loud, if the signs were obvious, then it wouldn't require trust. It wouldn't require faith. Think about the people you trust the most. They don't have to convince you of their presence. They don't have to demand your attention. Their quiet presence alone is enough. So maybe the question isn't whether we're being spoken to. Maybe the question is, are we still enough to hear it? We like to think we're in control, that if we plan well enough, work hard enough, prepare strategically enough, everything will unfold exactly as we designed. But then something happens. Something unexpected. Something we didn't plan for, yet somehow it fits too perfectly to ignore. Maybe you've had this experience. You've been thinking about making a big decision, unsure of which way to go, when suddenly you hear a story that mirrors your exact situation. Or you meet someone who seems to have been placed in your path at just the right time. Or a book, an article, even a song lyric speaks so directly to what you've been wrestling with, it feels as if it was written just for you. We call these moments coincidences. We shrug them off. We tell ourselves, that's weird, and move on. But deep down, we feel it. We sense that these moments aren't just random. They carry weight. They mean something. Think about how many things had to align for that coincidence to occur. A person had to be at the right place, at the right time, saying the right words, without even knowing they were meant for you. That book had to be written, published, distributed, and somehow make its way into your hands at the exact moment you needed it. That job opening had to be posted, that invitation extended, that advice given, all as if the universe had orchestrated it with precision. Some people call it luck. Others call it fate. But if we look closer, we might realize that these moments aren't about luck at all. They're about alignment, about timing, about something greater than us working behind the scenes, nudging events into place. The real question is, why do we experience them? Why do certain messages, certain people, certain opportunities show up just as we're wrestling with a choice or a challenge? Why do these moments seem to occur more frequently when we're searching for something deeper? Whether it's purpose, clarity, or direction, it's almost as if we're being guided, as if the answers we're looking for are being placed in front of us, not with a flashing neon sign, but in the form of small, almost imperceptible moments of connection. Moments that can be dismissed as random or embraced as intentional. And here's the thing. The more we start paying attention to these moments, the more they seem to happen. It's not that they weren't happening before, it's just that we were too distracted to notice, too busy trying to control every detail of our lives to recognize that maybe, just maybe, something bigger was at play. So the question isn't whether these coincidences are happening, the question is, are we willing to see them for what they really are? Have you ever been in a moment of uncertainty, wrestling with a decision, when suddenly you hear exactly what you need to hear, not just any words, but the precise message that seems tailored for your situation? It could be a line from a book, a passing comment from a friend, a sermon, a speech, or even a random conversation overheard in a coffee shop. It lands so perfectly that it stops you in your tracks. It feels less like chance and more like something meant for you. There's something remarkable about timing. We don't always recognize it in the moment, but when we look back, we realize how certain messages arrived at exactly the right time. Just before we made a big decision, just before we gave up on something important, just before we let fear talk us out of what we were meant to do. It's as if the words we needed were waiting for us, patiently, until the precise moment when we were ready to receive them. Think about the last time this happened to you. Maybe you were feeling stuck, unsure of what to do next, and then you heard a story of someone who had been through the exact same struggle and found a way through. Maybe you were questioning your worth, doubting your abilities, when a mentor, a friend, or even a stranger unknowingly spoke life into you, reminding you of what you had forgotten about yourself. Maybe you were on the verge of walking away from something important, and then, out of nowhere, a message arrived that told you to keep going. These moments don't just feel coincidental, they feel intentional. They feel designed. It's as if there's something or someone who knows exactly when we're about to make the wrong choice, take the easy way out, or settle for less than we're capable of. And just before we do, the right words show up. Not too soon, not too late, but exactly when we need them. But here's what's interesting. The message was always there. The book you suddenly picked up and found profound wasn't just written that day. The song that spoke to your heart had been recorded long before you heard it. The advice from a friend wasn't newly created. It had existed in their mind for a while. The message was always there, waiting for the right time to reach you. And maybe that's the point. Maybe guidance isn't about receiving brand new revelations every time we need them. Maybe it's about hearing things we've already been told, but with fresh ears, in a moment when we're finally ready to understand them. It's easy to dismiss these moments as mere coincidence. But when they happen over and over again, when the right words find you at the right time again and again, you have to ask yourself, what are the chances, what are the odds that every time you needed direction, reassurance, or clarity, the exact message you required just happened to appear? And if these messages keep coming at the exact moment you need them, maybe the real question isn't whether they're real. Maybe the real question is, are we listening? We are taught to seek comfort. We spend our lives chasing stability, certainty, and the feeling of being settled. We work hard to build routines, secure jobs, and create relationships that make us feel safe. And yet there are moments, sometimes small, sometimes overwhelming, when that very comfort begins to feel uneasy. It's subtle at first. A lingering sense of dissatisfaction, a nagging feeling that something isn't quite right. The things that once excited us now feel dull. The job that once seemed perfect now feels draining. The relationship we fought for now leaves us questioning. It's not always something we can explain, but it's something we feel. Restlessness is uncomfortable, but it isn't random. It has a purpose. It's a signal, a whisper from something greater than us, telling us that where we are is no longer where we're meant to be. But what do? Instead of listening, we try to silence it. We distract ourselves with work, with entertainment, with endless scrolling. We tell ourselves we should be grateful that other people have it worse, that there's no logical reason to feel this way. We convince ourselves that if we just push through, the feeling will go away. But it doesn't. It lingers. It grows. And the longer we ignore it, the louder it becomes. Think about it. Why would you feel restless in a situation that's truly right for you? Why would you experience discomfort in a place where you're meant to stay? Restlessness is often mistaken for impatience, but they're not the same thing. Impatience is wanting something before it's time. Restlessness is realizing that where you are no longer fits who you are becoming. And discomfort is the birthplace of growth. No one evolves in comfort. No one discovers their true potential in a place where everything is predictable and easy. Every major breakthrough, every transformation, every moment of clarity comes after a period of discomfort. Think about any meaningful change in your life. It likely didn't happen in a moment of complete peace. It probably started with an unease you couldn't shake, a tension between where you were and where you knew you were meant to be. A growing awareness that you had outgrown your circumstances, your mindset, or even your identity. This is why discomfort should never be ignored. It's not just an inconvenience, it's information. It's telling you something about your path, about your purpose, about the next step you're afraid to take. But most people don't see it that way. Most people resist it. They fight to hold onto what is familiar, even when it no longer serves them. They stay in jobs they hate, relationships that drain them, routines that no longer inspire them, all because they fear the unknown more than they fear staying stuck. But what if the discomfort isn't there to punish you? What if it's there to wake you up? What if it's not a sign that something is wrong, but a sign that something more is waiting for you? And if that's the case, then the real question isn't why you feel restless. The real question is, what are you being called to do next? Life is full of uncertainty. We plan, we prepare, we do everything in our power to control outcomes. Yet there are moments when things don't go as expected. Sometimes the road ahead is unclear. Sometimes we are faced with decisions that carry weight. Sometimes we walk through seasons of difficulty, grief, or transition, unsure of how things will turn out. And yet, in the midst of all of this, sometimes, without warning, we feel something we can't explain. A quiet, steady assurance, a calm that defies logic, a deep knowing that despite everything, things are going to be okay. It's not the kind of peace that comes from having all the answers. It's not the kind of peace that comes from certainty or comfort or knowing how the story ends. It's something deeper, something unshaken, something that doesn't always make sense. Think about a time when you should have felt anxious, but instead you felt calm. A time when the circumstances around you should have overwhelmed you, but somehow they didn't. A time when things were falling apart, but inside you weren't. Maybe you couldn't explain it. Maybe people around you even questioned it. How are you so calm? How are you not panicking? How do you have peace right now? But that's the thing. This kind of peace doesn't come from us. It's not something we manufacture, not something we force ourselves to feel. It's given to us. It arrives when we need it most, like an anchor in the middle of the storm, holding us steady when everything around us feels unsteady. And this peace doesn't mean that everything is easy. It doesn't mean we don't have questions or doubts or fears. It doesn't mean we don't still wrestle with uncertainty. It just means that, even in the uncertainty, we are not afraid. Even in the unknown, we trust that we are being held. But here's the thing. This peace often comes after surrender. Not after we've figured everything out, but after we've stopped trying to. After we've let go of the need to control, to fix, to force things to happen on our own timeline. It comes when we finally stop gripping so tightly to our own plans and open ourselves up to something greater. Because sometimes the peace we're searching for isn't found in having the answers. It's found in trusting that we don't need to have them. And this is why it's a peace beyond understanding. Because from the outside, it doesn't make sense. It's not tied to circumstances. It's not dictated by outcomes. It's not dependent on things working out the way we want them to. It just is. It remains steady in the face of uncertainty. It stays with us when everything else is shifting. It reminds us that we are not alone. And maybe that's the most powerful thing about it. Not that it removes the storm, but that it allows us to walk through the storm without fear. Not that it gives us all the answers, but that it reassures us we don't need to have them. Not that it makes the road ahead clear, but that it gives us the strength to take the next step, even when we can't see what's beyond it. Life is not meant to be lived in isolation. No matter how independent we are, no matter how much we rely on our own instincts, wisdom, or experience, there are moments when we need something more. When the answers we seek don't come from within, but through the voices of those around us. There are times when someone speaks into our lives with words we didn't even know we needed to hear. A friend, a mentor, a stranger, or even someone we've barely interacted with before. Out of nowhere, they say something that cuts through the noise, something that feels strangely, undeniably meant for us. Maybe it's advice that shifts our perspective. Maybe it's encouragement at a moment when we were on the verge of giving up. Maybe it's a challenge that forces us to rethink the way we've been living. But whatever it is, it lands differently. It feels more than just words. It feels like a message, a reminder, a nudge in the right direction. And the interesting thing is, these people often have no idea what they've done. They don't know what we're struggling with. They don't realize we've been wrestling with a decision. They have no way of knowing how timely, how perfect, how necessary their words are. Yet somehow, what they say is exactly what we needed. Think about the last time this happened to you. Maybe you were doubting yourself, questioning whether you were capable, and someone unexpectedly affirmed your gifts, your potential, your worth. Maybe you were unsure about a decision, and someone unknowingly spoke words that gave you clarity. Maybe you were going through a difficult time, feeling invisible, unnoticed, and someone reached out, reminding you that you're not alone. And it's not just what they say. It's how they say it. There's a weight to their words, a sense that they're not just speaking from their own mind, but from something beyond them, as if they were placed in that moment, at that time, to be a vessel for something greater. But here's the challenge. Are we paying attention? Because if we're too busy, too distracted, too skeptical, we might dismiss these moments as nothing more than coincidences. We might brush off the encouragement, ignore the challenge, or assume the message wasn't meant for us. And just as importantly, are we open to receiving the hard words, not just the comforting ones? Because sometimes the people who speak into our lives aren't just there to affirm us, but to challenge us. Sometimes they say things we don't want to hear, but deep down, we know they're true. Sometimes they call us out, point us toward growth, or hold up a mirror to things we'd rather avoid. Sometimes we don't know. Are we the mirror, the torch? That's why discernment is key. Not every voice is meant for us. Not every opinion is guidance. Not every comment deserves our attention. But when the right words come from the right people at the right time, we know it. Something inside us stirs. We feel the truth of it, even if we don't want to admit it. And maybe that's the point. Maybe we were never meant to figure everything out on our own. Maybe in the moments when we need direction the most, the answers don't always come in isolation, but through the voices of those who have been placed in our path for a reason. We like to believe we are in control. that if we plan well enough, work hard enough, and strategize every step, things will go exactly as we intend. But life has a way of reminding us that control is, at best, an illusion, because just when we think we have it all figured out, something unexpected happens. An opportunity we never saw coming presents itself out of nowhere. A conversation leads to a job offer. A random encounter turns into a lifelong friendship. A single decision, seemingly insignificant at the time, sets off a chain reaction that changes everything. And just as often, the opposite happens. The door we were counting on suddenly shuts. The promotion we worked for is given to someone else. The business deal falls through. The relationship we thought would last forever comes to an end. In those moments, our first instinct is frustration, confusion, maybe even anger. We ask ourselves, why did this happen? We replay every detail, trying to figure out what we did wrong. We cling to the closed door, refusing to accept that it's not meant for us. But what if the door didn't close to punish us? What if it closed to protect us? What if that opportunity wasn't denied, but redirected? Think about a time when something didn't work out the way you planned. Maybe at the time, it felt like a failure. But now, looking back, you can see how that closed door led you to something better. Maybe you didn't get the job you wanted, but it forced you to pursue something even more fulfilling. Maybe that relationship ending made space for someone who truly sees you. Maybe the delay, the detour, the disappointment wasn't a mistake. It was a necessary step towards something greater. And then there are the doors that open unexpectedly. The ones that seem too easy, too perfect, almost as if they were designed just for us. These moments remind us that no matter how much we try to control things, there are forces at work beyond our understanding. But here's the challenge. When an unexpected door opens, we hesitate. We overthink it. We doubt whether we're ready, whether we're qualified, whether we deserve it. We question why it's happening now when we weren't prepared for it. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the best opportunities aren't the ones we chase. They're the ones that find us when we're least expecting them. And yet, not every closed door is meant to stay closed, just as not every open door is meant to be walked through. Sometimes the test isn't about whether the opportunity is there. It's about whether we have the wisdom to recognize which doors are meant for us. Because if every closed door feels like rejection and every open door feels like an automatic yes, then we've missed the deeper truth. It's not about forcing doors open or mourning the ones that close. It's about learning to discern which ones are leading us where we're meant to go. And if doors are opening and closing around you right now, maybe the question isn't whether they're random. Maybe the question is, what are they trying to tell you? We spend so much of our lives searching for answers. We analyze, we debate, we ask for advice, we weigh our options, and we stress over making the right decisions. We replay conversations in our heads, wondering if we said the right thing. We make pros and cons lists, trying to predict the future before we take a single step forward. And yet, despite all this thinking, despite all this effort, clarity doesn't always come when we expect it. It doesn't come when we're trying to force it. It doesn't come when we're desperately searching for it. In fact, more often than not, it arrives in an instant, out of nowhere, like a flash of lightning in the middle of a storm. It's the moment when all the noise in your mind quiets, when the overthinking stops, when suddenly, without warning, you just know. You know you have to leave that job. You know that person isn't meant for you. You know it's time to take the risk, to start the business, to make the move, to have the difficult conversation. You know, without a doubt, what needs to be done. And what's strange about these moments is that they rarely come when we're actively trying to figure things out. They come when we least expect them, when we're taking a walk, when we're in the shower, when we're driving with the radio off. They arrive in the stillness, in the spaces where we finally stop forcing and start listening. Think about it. How many times have you wrestled with a problem for weeks, maybe even months, only to have the answer come to you in the most random moment? Not after hours of debating, not after endless worrying, but in a brief, unexpected instant. That's the thing about clarity. It doesn't beg for your attention. It doesn't compete with all the noise in your head. It simply arrives, and when it does, it feels so obvious that you wonder why you ever doubted it in the first place. But here's the real challenge. What do we do when it comes? Because for many people, clarity is terrifying. Knowing the answer means we have to act on it. It means we can no longer hide behind indecision. It means we can no longer pretend we don't know what to do. And that's where the resistance kicks in. We start second-guessing ourselves. We go back to asking for advice, hoping someone will talk us out of what we already know is true. We tell ourselves it was just a fleeting thought, not a real answer. We let fear convince us that clarity was just a trick of the mind. But deep down, we know better. Because when real clarity hits, it's not a whisper, it's a knowing. It doesn't come with doubt. It doesn't come with overthinking. It comes with certainty, with peace, with an undeniable sense that this is the truth we've been avoiding all along. And maybe that's why it shows up when it does, because we're finally ready to listen. We often expect divine communication to be loud, unmistakable, impossible to miss. But more often than not, it comes in subtler ways. A whisper instead of a shout, a feeling instead of a command, a nudge instead of a push. The challenge is not whether God is speaking. The challenge is whether we are paying attention. He speaks through unusual coincidences, aligning events in ways that defy logic. He speaks through the right message arriving at the right time, words that cut through the noise and land exactly when we need them. He speaks through restlessness and discomfort, stirring something inside us that refuses to be ignored. He speaks when doors open or close unexpectedly, redirecting us towards something greater than we had planned for ourselves. And sometimes he speaks in a sudden burst of clarity, a knowing that leaves no room for doubt. These signs are not random. They are not accidents. They are invitations. Reminders that we are not navigating this life alone, that there is guidance available to us if we are willing to listen. But listening requires something from us. It requires stillness in a world full of distractions. It requires trust in moments of uncertainty. It requires courage to follow the signs, even when they lead us into the unknown. Because ultimately, the real question isn't whether God is talking. The real question is, are we willing to hear him?